version of Spider-Man do you like the most? For me, it is probably the version released in 2002. It is completely different from the later Spider-Man versions. I still clearly remember the scene where Peter Parker swings through the buildings of New York, the iconic upside-down kiss in the rain. And the line, "With great power comes great responsibility," echoing in the dark theatre. Those moments were carved deeply into my childhood memory. But the deeper I dig into the behind the scenes, the more strange details I discover. Tobey almost suffocated for real in the kissing scene. The famous Spider-Man suit turned out to be hell for the actor. Or James Cameron once wanted to hide 2 near-fatal accidents on set. Let us explore 20 unbelievable facts behind this film. Things that many fans in 2002 never heard about. 20. The upside-down kiss almost made Tobey Maguire suffocate. If asked which scene impressed me the most, it would definitely be the upside-down kiss in the rain between Peter Parker and Mary Jane in Spider-Man 2002. That moment with pouring rain and dim streetlights became a romantic symbol of the early 2000s, making many viewers in the theatre feel their hearts pounding as if they themselves were being kissed for the first time. But behind that beauty were difficult hours on set. Tobey Maguire was hung upside down for many takes. Freezing rainwater ran backward into his nose, making him nearly suffocate, only able to gasp short breaths from the corner of his mouth. He recalled that the sinus congestion made his head spin, his voice broken when calling cut. The tight latex suit made everything worse, unable to breathe deeply. Body compressed to the point of discomfort, even going to the bathroom required help to remove each layer. Kirsten Dunst, standing under the freezing artificial rain, had to hold Tobey tightly so he wouldn't faint. Before that, Tobey had never read a Spider-Man comic, but he spent 5 months training his body just to be ready for the role. 19. The Spider-Man suit was a latex hell. When I was little, the red and blue Spider-Man suit with web patterns was the dream of many children, including me sitting in front of the TV, waiting for every scene of Tobey Maguire flying through New York's buildings. Looking at Tobey, in that suit, we only saw perfection strength, like an unbeatable symbol of early 2000s youth. But the reality on set was completely different. The suit was made of many thick latex layers and hard foam tightly pressing against Tobey's body like a second skin, not allowing deep breaths or heat to escape. Sweat pooled inside, heating up so much that on some sunny filming days in New York, he experienced a sudden drop in blood pressure, had to lie down mid-shoot. His face pale, hands trembling. Going to the bathroom became a nightmare. The entire suit had to be removed, layer by layer, taking 10 to 12 minutes each time, making Tobey plan carefully, sometimes holding it in to the point of exhaustion. Those heavy layers were not only tight, but also restricted movement, turning every action scene into a true physical battle. Tobey recalled that at times, he felt like he was trapped in a cocoon with no way out. 18. The 9/11 event forced major edits to the film that day. The entire United States was shaken by the 9/11 event when the Twin Towers collapsed and the whole world seemed to hold its breath. Spider-Man 2002 was filmed in 2001 in New York. So in many background scenes, the Twin Towers still stood tall. Those iconic buildings quietly appeared in Peter Parker's swinging shots through the city sky. But after that fateful day, Sony had to take drastic action. They erased all images of the Twin Towers from the entire film, from wide shots to close-ups reflected in Spider-Man's eyes on the poster. The famous trailer with a helicopter trapped between the 2 towers was also immediately removed. The edits required re-editing many scenes, filming new replacement footage, and changing the entire marketing campaign in a short time. These changes were not just technical, they carried silent sorrow like a tribute to the shared pain of a whole nation. The crew worked in a heavy atmosphere, both regretting the beautiful scenes that were lost and understanding that history had intervened in art in an unavoidable way. 17. Accident nearly paralysed a stunt performer. There was a truth that at the time the crew did not dare to announce, only quietly handled internally to avoid public panic, a serious accident involving a stunt performer in a climactic action scene. He slipped from the rigging wire and fell straight from a height of about 12 meters onto a cold, hard metal floor. The crash sound echoed harshly, then fell silent. The entire set seemed to stop breathing. Luckily, he did not die, but the spinal injury was so severe he had to be hospitalized for days off work for nearly a year and almost ended his stunt career. The production immediately halted for 2 days to investigate the entire safety process, checking cables, harnesses, technical crew. At that time, rigging safety technology was not as developed as it is now. Everything still relied heavily on experience and luck. Those fragile wires, the cold set floor, and that freefall moment reminded that behind every spectacular swing on screen is a thin line between life and death. Tobey Maguire and the main cast became more cautious afterward, but no one said it aloud. They just quietly continued as a way of respecting the fallen colleague. 16. The animatronic Green Goblin mask was scrapped for being too scary. Do you still remember Green Goblin's face in Spider-Man 2002? That purple-green helmet with glowing red eyes and a twisted grin scared and fascinated countless viewers, especially kids like me back then, sitting in a dark theatre, hearts pounding whenever he appeared. But few know that the first version of the mask was completely different. A complex animatronic design with mechanical components inside, allowing the eyes to squint, the mouth to sneer, sharp teeth to be exposed in a snarl. It wasn't just a plastic helmet, but more like a gore puppet from a horror film so vividly expressive it gave people chills. When tested with a group of female actors in a closed room, many burst into tears immediately out of fear, and the atmosphere became so heavy that director Sam Raimi had to stop. The studio worried the rating would be pushed to R, a strict restriction at that time, so they decided to scrap that design, entirely switching to a stiffer plastic helmet, which later caused debates about it being not scary enough. Willem Dafoe still delivered a brilliant performance thanks to his acting and voice, but the rattling metal mechanisms in that test version are now only a memory. 15. Spider-Man was the first film to use the Marvel page flip logo. Few know that Spider-Man 2002 was the first movie to introduce the Marvel page flip logo, the image of colourful comic book pages slowly turning, accompanied by the familiar rustling paper sound. When that logo appeared on the big screen for the first time in the summer of 2002, many viewers like me sitting in the theatre suddenly felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if those old comic books on our shelves had come to life. Before that, the Marvel logo was just a plain line of text, lifeless. But with Spider-Man, they decided to turn it into a ritual, a page flips, revealing the movie title, then transitions to the scene. That idea quickly spread, reused in Daredevil, 2003, Hulk 2003, X-Men 2, 2003 becoming the first identity symbol of the Marvel brand in the cinematic superhero era. It evoked the origin of paper comics, when we had to wait months to buy the next issue at the old bookstore. Today, Marvel Studios has switched to a grander cinematic montage, but that page flip logo back then was still the starting moment, when superheroes were no longer just a personal dream, but began forming a shared universe, recognized by millions in just a few seconds of imagery. 14. Leonardo DiCaprio was the #1 candidate for Peter Parker. Just imagine if the role of Peter Parker in 2002 had gone to Leonardo DiCaprio, how different everything would have been. At the time, Sony considered him the #1 candidate, a star fresh off Titanic, youthful, dreamy with global audience appeal. His name was listed first in the casting list: Leonardo DiCaprio, Heath Ledger, Chris Klein, Jude Law, Freddie Prinze Jr. Each brought a different colour, but Leo seemed the safest and brightest choice. Auditions were held in private rooms in Los Angeles with script in hand, and director Sam Raimi observing. Tobey Maguire, who was ultimately chosen, had a clumsy, more relatable appearance, just like the boy next door that the comics portrayed. Leo, with perfect looks and deep eyes, might have made Peter Parker more charming and mature, but might also have lost the sweet innocence audiences loved. Heath Ledger would later become famous as the Joker, an interesting contrast, as if fate arranged for each to hold their destined place. In the end, Tobey was chosen and cinema history changed. But thinking back to those other names, we realise Spider-Man 2002 was the result of countless chance decisions. If Leo had taken the role, perhaps we would have had a different Peter Parker, more charming, but would he still have felt as close as the youthful memory many people hold? 13. James Cameron almost directed the film into a completely different version. Even if you are a fan of Spider-Man, you might not know that before Sam Raimi took the helm, James Cameron, the director who had just created the Titanic phenomenon, almost became the one to bring Spider-Man to the big screen. After Titanic's massive success in 1997, Cameron developed a version of Spider-Man that was more mature, darker, and much bolder. In his script, Peter Parker shoots webs directly from his wrists, similar to the original comics, includes scenes with profanity, explicit sex, even Peter secretly watching Mary Jane change clothes. The villains weren't just Green Goblin, but also Electro and Dr. Octopus, with Arnold Schwarzenegger once considered for the octopus role. Cameron wanted a superhero film full of adult themes closer to the violent style of RoboCop or Total Recall rather than a children's comic adaptation. That project dragged on for years, caught in a whirlpool of copyright lawsuits between studios. In the end, Cameron backed out. Sony bought the rights and chose Sam Raimi, a true Spider-Man fan, to go with a gentler, more family tragedy-driven approach. Cameron's old script pages are now relics of an untaken path, a completely different version of Spider-Man 1 that might have totally altered our youthful memories. 12. Green Goblin once had a very different design. Even if you're a fan of Spider-Man, you probably don't know that Green Goblin in the 2002 film was once designed in a completely different direction. Grotesque, biological, and closer to horror than superhero. The initial concept was inspired by the flesh and bone style. The armour wasn't shiny metal, but an organic layer with bulging tendons, exposed ribs beneath a thin shell. The mask blended with the flesh like a mutated creature. If kept, Green Goblin would have looked like a monster from a body horror film, shifting the whole movie toward a dark, chilling tone instead of heroic adventure. Sam Raimi and the design team sketched dozens of drafts, images of Goblin with long arms, twisted claws, a deformed body as if mutated from within. When presented, the studio feared audiences, especially children, would be haunted, even pushing the rating higher than expected. In the end, they chose the simpler plastic helmet version mechanical armour, still frightening, but more acceptable. Willem Dafoe still shined through his acting and shrill laughter, but he lost the chance to embody an ambitious, freakish design. 11. The legal battle lasted nearly 20 years before the film could be made. Imagine your favourite character being torn apart among many major studios with a copyright dispute that lasted nearly 2 decades. That was the fate of Spider-Man before Sam Raimi began filming in 2002. Since the 1980s, ownership had fallen into a whirlpool of lawsuits between Canon Films, Carolco, MGM, Sony, Columbia, and Marvel. At one point, Marvel was on the brink of bankruptcy, forced to sell more character rights to cover legal costs. One studio held the rights to make the film. Another held rights to the costume. Some only had rights to characters like Aunt May or Uncle Ben. Lawyers at the time called it Hollywood's butchered child, a mess of papers, overlapping contracts, and endless court hearings. Eventually, Sony won the production rights, but at the cost of years of waiting and compromise. When the film premiered, many viewers had no idea they were watching the result of a long legal war where Spider-Man almost never made it to the big screen. Looking back, that journey reminds us that behind every classic movie often lies a story more complex than its script. 10. Sam Raimi was chosen because he was a true Spider-Man fan. Among many big names invited to direct Spider-Man, Sam Raimi was perhaps the most unexpected choice, but also the most sincere. Before him, Chris Columbus, Tony Scott, M. Night Shyamalan. Even David Fincher were considered. Fincher wanted to jump straight into Gwen Stacy's death story, a dark idea that the studio immediately rejected for fear of losing young audiences. Raimi, with a background in Evil Dead and Darkman, came in not for fame, but for his genuine love of Spider-Man. He had been a comic fan since childhood, memorized every old issue, and when he received the script, he revised it to focus on the father-son best-friend tragedy between Norman Osborn, Harry and Peter, moving Doc Ock to the sequel so that the first film's story would be deeper. The decision to choose Raimi wasn't based on box office record, but on true passion. That's what gave the film its own soul-nostalgic, honest, not chasing trends. 9. Sam Raimi once wanted a black Spider-Man, but was rejected. In the early casting meetings, Sam Raimi once proposed a bold idea expanding the search for Peter Parker to include black actors. He believed Spider-Man could belong to anyone, and a black Peter Parker would bring freshness and more relatability for many viewers. But Sony in 2001 flatly rejected the idea. The reason given was the international world is not ready to accept a black superhero, a sentiment reflecting Hollywood's tastes and fears at the time. That idea was dismissed, and Tobey Maguire was chosen with the familiar look from the original comics. It would take nearly another 10 years before Miles Morales appeared in Ultimate Spider-Man and gradually gained wide acceptance. Raimi later admitted regret for not being able to realise that desire earlier. Still, his persistence planted the seed for later changes. 8. VFX legend. John Dykstra joined the team. When Spider-Man swung between the buildings of New York in 2002, few knew that behind those spectacular swinging scenes was the hand of John Dykstra, the visual effects legend who helped create ILM and the iconic space sequences in Star Wars. Dykstra was invited to head the visual effects department, bringing with him experience from the early days of CGI. He and the team had to innovate using old computers, rendering each frame for hours, even days, to create smooth motion for the webs and Peter Parker's body. Though now those swinging scenes may look a bit animated compared to today's standards back then, they marked a breakthrough, the first time a superhero was mostly built with digital effects rather than physical models. Dykstra combined real wire work with CGI, creating a realism that made audiences believe Tobey was truly flying through the air. Those long nights in chilled rooms, the hum of cooling fans, were the proof of a transition era from practical to digital effects. Thanks to him, Spider-Man was not just a movie. It opened the era that all future superheroes would rely on. 7. James Franco once auditioned for the role of Spider-Man. You might not know that James Franco was one of the actors who auditioned for Peter Parker before Tobey Maguire. He walked into the audition room with the script in hand, acted naturally, but director Sam Raimi ultimately felt Franco had a mature look a bit too cool compared to the clumsy, shy boy portrayed in the comics. Not chosen for the lead role, Franco quickly switched to audition for Harry Osborn, and he nailed it. To resemble Willem Dafoe, Harry's father, he even dyed his hair blonde, creating a clear family resemblance on screen. At the same time, the role of Mary Jane also once considered Alicia Witt, a striking red-haired actress, before Kirsten Dunst was chosen for her gentle, relatable beauty. Those auditions took place in an intimate atmosphere, only a few people in the room, no social media to spread clips. Franco later shared that being rejected for Peter actually opened the door for Harry, a complex, tragic role he turned into an icon. 6. The MJ rain scene used dirty water mixed with glycerin. The scene where Mary Jane stands in the rain, hair-soaked eyes gazing at Peter with emotion. That moment etched into the memories of many generations. But few know that the rain in that scene wasn't clean water from ordinary sprayers. To make the water look good on film, shiny and fall slowly, the crew had to mix in glycerin, a thick, sticky liquid that made droplets cling longer to skin and hair. The result, Kirsten Dunst's hair clumped up her skin, mildly irritated, burning after many continuous takes. She once said the artificial rain smelled awful, like a mix of engine oil and burnt sugar. Under the studio lights, freezing water poured endlessly, making Kirsten shiver between scenes. Tobey, standing opposite, also had to endure the soaking, but the glycerin made everything exponentially more uncomfortable. The large sprayers, the sound of gushing water and the chemical smell spreading across the set all created a harsh, behind-the-scenes reality behind the romantic image. 5. Stan Lee's second cameo, Stan Lee, the father of Marvel, appeared in Spider-Man 2002 with a brief but warm cameo. He played a passerby who saved a little girl from falling debris when Green Goblin attacked. That moment when he rushed in, embraced the child, then looked up at the sky with concern. Just a few seconds, but enough to make audiences smile in recognition. This was his second cameo in a Marvel film after X-Men 2000. And from here, the tradition of Stan Lee cameos became an unchanging ritual, a friendly greeting from the creator to the fans. At that time, cameos were still simple, not showy, just a quiet appearance in the midst of chaotic crowds. Stan Lee walked onto the set with his familiar smile, wearing an ordinary jacket, acted his part, and then left like a regular viewer. That scene was filmed quickly, but it carried the warmth of a time when Marvel still felt close before it became a massive machine. 4. Almost had a shared universe with the Mutants. Imagine if Spider-Man 2002 had a cameo where Wolverine popped out in the middle of the New York crowd. That almost happened. Hugh Jackman, then at the peak of his fame with X-Men, flew from Los Angeles to New York to shoot a short scene, Wolverine appearing briefly watching Peter Parker swing on his web, then muttering something like, "Kid, watch it." This would have been the first time two Marvel universes, Fox's X-Men and Sony's Spider-Man, crossed paths a full 10 years before the MCU. But the only barrier was the costume. Fox did not allow the official Wolverine suit to be borrowed due to copyright and confidentiality. The crew had to cancel the shoot at the last minute. Hugh Jackman recalled that he was ready, even tried a few claw poses in his hotel room, but in the end, it remained just a what-if story. Had it succeeded, this would have been the first superhero shared universe on the big screen, starting the crossover era much earlier. 3. Uncle Ben and Aunt May, real age versus in the film when watching Spider-Man 2002. We easily believe that Uncle Ben and Aunt May are an elderly couple, just as the dialogue in the film suggests Ben is mentioned as being 68 years old. But in reality, Cliff Robertson, who played Uncle Ben, was about 79 during filming with white hair and a trembling voice full of experience. Rosemary Harris, who played Aunt May, was also over 75 with a gentle smile and warm eyes that made everyone feel as if she were their own grandmother. That age gap was not accidental. Director Sam Raimi wanted the supporting characters to appear old and fragile to deepen the tragedy. Uncle Ben's death felt even more painful because he was in his twilight years and Aunt May would later have to endure the sorrow alone. Rosemary Harris lived well into her 90s, witnessing the later Spider-Man series. The warm conversations in the little house in Queens still move us today, because behind the simple dialogue was the sacrifice of two elderly actors, giving the audience a real sense of family. 2. This was the first Marvel film to earn $100 million in just 3 days. In the summer of 2002, when Spider-Man hit theaters, long lines of people formed early in the morning in front of cinemas across the US, cheerful chatter under the sun. The film quickly broke records in just the opening weekend. It grossed over $114 million, becoming the first Marvel film to cross the 100 million mark in just 3 days. That number was a real blockbuster at the time, paving the way for superhero movies to become Hollywood's money-making machines. Before Spider-Man comic-based films were usually modest hits, no one dared dream of such massive box office success. Its success wasn't just due to special effects or story, but because it struck the right chord with audiences, a relatable, clumsy, but responsible hero. Packed theatres' applause when Peter said, "With great power comes great responsibility," all created a festive atmosphere. One of the first films targeted by hackers. In 2002, when the internet was still slow and dial-up made screeching noises, Spider-Man became one of the first films systematically targeted by cybercriminals. A rough cut of the film leaked online. Large files shared through underground forums, later sold as bootleg DVDs with blurry quality, but still enough to watch before the official release. This was a rare phenomenon at the time when most blockbusters were still protected by old methods, physical copies, and strict control. Hollywood panicked. Sony had to tighten security, hire cybersecurity experts, and from there, studios began building film cybersecurity departments, the forerunners of today's anti-leak teams. Those old bootleg DVDs with poorly printed covers sold in black markets now seem like milestones of a new era when films were not only stolen in theatres, but also online. Spider-Man unintentionally became the first victim of the digital piracy wave, forcing the industry to change how it protects its content. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.